What if a single blast could reshape a nation's destiny? What if one battleship, built for strength, became a symbol of grief that never faded? What if that same ship still wept beneath the waves 8 decades later? This is the story of the USS Arizona, her life, her loss, and her legacy. Before she became a shrine, Arizona was alive, her decks filled with the hum of engines and the rhythm of disciplined men. In the early 20th century, the world was racing toward modern war, and the Pacific trembled with tension. The United States watched as conflict ignited abroad, yet tried to remain apart until danger crept closer across the Pacific. At Pearl Harbor, on the island of Oahu, the nation gathered its pride, its power, and its fate. Long before that terrible morning, the USS Arizona had already lived a full life, one that began in an age of optimism. She was commissioned in 1916, in the final years of World War I, built at the Brooklyn Navy Yard as part of the powerful Pennsylvania-class battleships. At over 600 feet long, she was a floating city of steel and steam, armed to the teeth and designed to project American strength across the seas. Yet, despite being born in wartime, the Arizona never fired a shot in combat during World War I. Her role was training, not fighting. Over the following decades, she became a symbol of America's growing naval power. The Arizona traveled the world, carrying presidents, ambassadors, and hope for a rising superpower. But time was changing fast. By the late 1920s, new technologies had outpaced her original design. To keep up, the Navy gave her a massive modernization in 1929. Her old cage masts were replaced with tripod masts, sturdier and more practical for mounting advanced fire control systems. New armor plating, machinery, and anti-aircraft guns made her ready for the modern battlefield. Below decks, her boilers and engines were completely rebuilt, transforming her from a World War I relic into a formidable machine of war once again. By the late 1930s, the Arizona was not just a ship, it was a living emblem of the U.S. Navy's pride. Her decks gleamed, her crew was among the finest, and her massive guns symbolized power and deterrence. Few could have imagined that within just a few years, this proud vessel, reborn through innovation, would meet such a fiery and tragic end in the very harbor meant to keep her safe. If the heart of a battleship is its crew, then its soul lies within its guns. And the USS Arizona possessed some of the most formidable ever mounted on an American warship. Her main battery consisted of 4 massive triple turrets, each armed with 3 14-inch guns, 12 in total. Each shell weighed nearly 1,500 pounds, capable of striking a target over 19 miles away. To fire even one round required an orchestra of more than 80 men moving in perfect coordination deep within the armored decks. Each gun was fed through a maze of machinery stretching down several decks. Below the turret lay the handling rooms, where giant shells were stacked and ready for loading. Nearby, the powder magazines stored hundreds of silk bags filled with explosive gunpowder, volatile, dangerous, and deadly if disturbed. The shells and powder were lifted upward by hydraulic hoists, then aligned precisely by the gun crews above. When firing, the process was mechanical and ritualistic. The mechanical rammer pushed the shell into the gun barrel, followed by 4 powder bags. Then the massive breech block locked into place with a heavy thud. All 3 guns elevated together, aiming skyward before unleashing thunder that shook the ocean itself. To outsiders, it was sheer spectacle, raw power and precision. But to those inside, it was discipline, teamwork, and danger, bound together by steel. Every shot fired was a reminder that the Arizona was not just a ship, she was a living machine, powered by human resolve and the will to command the sea.
Watch your starboard
Beneath
side.
the Arizona's armored decks lay a world few ever saw. A labyrinth of steel passageways, roaring engines, and endless heat. The ship had 8 decks in total. Above, sunlight and wind brushed across gleaming steel. Below, the heartbeat of the vessel pulsed through pipes, gears, and boiler rooms. It was a floating city, alive with rhythm and purpose. The upper decks held the ship's living quarters, rows of hammocks swinging gently above polished floors. In the mornings, sailors stowed their bedding to make space for meals and drills. The officers' quarters were more refined, with wood paneling, maps, and personal photographs, a rare comfort amid steel walls. Deeper below, the ship's soul burned in the boiler rooms. The Arizona had 6 oil-fired boilers, each one converting fuel into pressurized steam that powered the ship's turbines. That steam spun 4 massive propeller shafts, pushing the 31,000-ton giant across the Pacific. Unlike older ships like the Titanic, which ran on coal, the Arizona used oil fuel stored in tanks along the hull, some of which still hold traces of oil to this day. Every inch of space below deck had a purpose. Ammunition stores, machine shops, mess halls, and repair stations. It was a perfect ecosystem of men and metal. Here, unseen by most, the Arizona's true strength resided, not just in her guns, but in the relentless labor of the men who kept her heart beating. By the late 1930s, the Pacific Ocean had become a chessboard of ambition. Japan's empire was expanding rapidly across Asia, seizing territories and resources to fuel its growing military power. The United States, watching from afar, grew uneasy. Every move Japan made drew the two nations closer to confrontation. In response, Washington began reinforcing its naval presence in the Pacific. And at the heart of this strategy lay one critical location: Hawaii, the crossroads of East and West. Here, the U.S. Navy concentrated its might. Warships, cruisers, and destroyers gathered around Ford Island, the central hub of what sailors proudly called Battleship Row. These massive vessels, Arizona, Oklahoma, West Virginia, California, stood side by side, symbols of steel confidence in a world tilting toward chaos. Yet beneath this calm routine, danger brewed just beyond the horizon. Japan, desperate for oil and raw materials, saw America's Pacific Fleet not as a deterrent, but as an obstacle to be removed. No one in Pearl Harbor could imagine how close they were to history's edge. The quiet waters that reflected the morning sun would soon mirror flames that lit the world on fire. Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a date that would change the world. The morning began quietly at Pearl Harbor. The sky was clear, the sea was calm, and most of the sailors aboard their ships were just waking up. Breakfast was being served, letters were being written, and the band aboard the Arizona prepared for the daily flag-raising ceremony. No one knew that above the horizon, hundreds of aircraft were already on their way. From the north, the Imperial Japanese Navy was approaching in complete radio silence. 6 carriers had launched more than 300 planes, bombers, torpedo aircraft, and fighters, each marked with the Red Sun insignia. Their mission? Destroy America's Pacific Fleet before it could fight back. At 7:55 a.m., the first bombs fell. Explosions tore through airfields and ship decks. Within minutes, chaos consumed Battleship Row. The Oklahoma began to roll, The West Virginia caught fire, and the California took a direct hit. But the worst was yet to come. The USS Arizona took several near misses before fate delivered a fatal blow. A Japanese bomb plunged near turret number 2, piercing the upper decks before igniting the ship's powder magazine. The resulting explosion was so massive, it lifted the 31,000-ton battleship out of the water, tearing her apart in an instant. In less than 9 minutes, the Arizona sank. Over 1,170 men aboard were killed, nearly half of all American deaths that day. The ship burned for 2 days, her hull glowing beneath the oil-slicked water. When the smoke finally cleared, the once proud fortress had vanished beneath the waves. All that remained was a shattered hull, a plume of dark oil, and silence. December 7th, 1941. The morning that began with sunlight and music would end in smoke and ruin. The USS Arizona, once the pride of the Pacific Fleet, became the epicenter of tragedy. At 8:06 a.m., a Japanese bomb struck near turret number 2, slicing through her decks before plunging into the forward powder magazine. A moment later, a blinding flash tore through the ship, followed by a deafening roar that shattered windows miles away. The Arizona erupted into a tower of flame. The blast ripped the vessel apart, lifting her hull clear of the water before splitting her in two. Fire rolled across the decks, ammunition detonated in bursts, and steel rained down on nearby ships. The explosion was so violent that it killed nearly everyone on board instantly. Out of 1,512 officers and crew, 1,177 never escaped. For 2 days, the ship burned, a floating inferno of oil and twisted steel. The smell of smoke and burning fuel spread across Pearl Harbor, staining the air and the sea. Rescue teams tried desperately to save whoever they could, but the heat was unbearable. Many who dove into the oily waters never resurfaced. When the fires finally died, the once mighty ship lay silent beneath a slick of black oil. Only the tops of her masts and the broken barbette of turret 3 rose above the surface. The harbor water, still shimmering with fuel, would leak a thin, dark sheen for decades to come. What visitors would later call the black tears of the Arizona. Her guns were silent now, her crew entombed within her steel heart. But in her death, the Arizona became more than a ship. It became a symbol, a rallying cry for a nation that would rise from the ashes and answer with strength the world had never seen. In the years after the war, the wreck of the USS Arizona remained where she fell, silent, solemn, and sacred. Divers and engineers worked to recover what they could, but the ship's heart was gone. The Navy made a choice to let her rest where she sank, as a final resting place for those who never came home. 2 decades later, in 1962, the USS Arizona Memorial was built directly above the wreck. Its design tells a story without words. The center of the memorial dips low, symbolizing defeat, while the ends rise upward again, representing victory and renewal. Inside, 1,177 names are carved into a marble wall, each one a voice from that quiet morning long ago. From the deck above, visitors can see the remains of the Arizona below, her corroded steel still bleeding thin streaks of oil, known as the Black Tears. It's as if the ship herself still grieves for her fallen crew. Even today, some survivors choose to have their ashes placed inside the wreck, returning to their brothers for eternity. Every year, millions come here not just to remember, but to reflect. The Arizona is no longer a weapon of war. It's a monument to peace, sacrifice, and resilience. It reminds us that from the deepest loss can come the strongest unity, and from the darkest tragedy can rise a brighter hope. Every year, millions come here, not just to remember, but to reflect. The Arizona is no longer a weapon of war. It's a monument to peace, sacrifice, and resilience. It reminds us that from the deepest loss can come the strongest unity, and from the darkest tragedy can rise a brighter hope.